Dr. Alan Murphy rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the monitor. For 3 straight nights he had barely slept. The objects first appeared on deep space radar 72 hours ago, and since then the entire NASA facility had been in constant motion. "Dr. Murphy, you need to see this," said Olivia Grant, rushing into his office with a tablet in hand. Her normally neat brown hair was messy, and dark circles hung under her eyes. Like everyone else at the facility, she had been working, nonstop. Alan took the tablet and studied the new images. What had first appeared as a small cluster of objects approaching Earth had now multiplied. Hundreds, maybe thousands of containers were now visible, all on a direct path to Earth orbit. "Have we made contact yet?" he asked. Olivia shook her head. "Every attempt has failed. Whatever or whoever they are, they're not responding to standard greeting protocols." Alan stood up and walked to the large window overlooking the control room below. Dozens of scientists and military personnel moved about with purpose. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. "The president has been briefed," said a firm female voice from the doorway. Alan turned to see General Susan Blake entering his office. Her uniform was perfectly pressed despite the crisis, and her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun. At 53, Blake had earned a reputation as a level-headed military leader. "What's the official response?" Alan asked. "For now, we wait and watch," Blake replied. "Military forces worldwide are on high alert. If these visitors have hostile intent, we'll be as ready as we can be." The 3 of them walked together to the main control room as new alarms started blaring. "They're changing course," announced a young technician. "The objects are spreading out, forming a ring around the planet." On the massive screen, they watched as the mysterious fleet dispersed, creating a loose belt around Earth. For several tense hours, nothing happened. Military jets from various nations patrolled the skies. Missile defense systems were primed. The world held its breath. Then, without warning, the objects began to open. "Are they deploying weapons?" General Blake demanded. "No energy signatures consistent with weapons," replied the technician. "They appear to be releasing their contents." Alan watched in stunned silence as the containers began dumping their contents into Earth's orbit. The material didn't look like weapons or surveillance equipment. It looked like garbage, Olivia whispered. "They're dumping garbage into our orbit." The realization spread through the control room. The first alien contact with Earth wasn't an invasion or a diplomatic mission. It was a massive orbital dumping operation. For the next 12 hours, the containers continued to release their contents into Earth's orbit. Strange metallic objects, crystalline structures, and materials unlike anything seen on Earth formed a new orbital ring around the planet. When the dumping finally stopped, the containers closed and the fleet regrouped. Then came the message. Simple, direct, and broadcast on all frequencies in perfect English. Disposal complete. No return expected. Use as desired. Before Earth's nations could formulate a response, the alien fleet accelerated away from the planet and vanished from radar within minutes. 3 days later, Alan found himself in a secure government facility in Nevada. The room was filled with military and scientific leaders from around the world. At the front, General Blake stood next to a map showing the debris field. "The aliens, whoever they are, have left our solar system," she announced. "But they've left behind approximately 2,000 tons of unidentified material in our orbit. Some of it is already entering our atmosphere." A video played showing a bright object streaking across the sky before crashing in a remote area of the Australian outback. Similar footage from Russia, Canada, and Brazil followed. "We're calling them the Vrexians," said Alan, taking over the presentation. "The name comes from a symbol repeated on many of the containers." He showed an image of an angular V-like symbol with complex markings. "Our best linguists are working on their language, but what's clear is that they've left us what appears to be their garbage, technology they no longer needed or wanted." Olivia stepped forward with a metal case. She opened it to reveal what looked like a small disc with strange markings. "This fell near a research station in Antarctica," she explained. "It appears to be some kind of data storage device, but it's not functioning. Most of the materials we've recovered are intact, but non-operational." General Blake took control of the meeting again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are establishing Operation Salvage. Every nation will coordinate recovery efforts for debris falling in their territory. All findings will be shared through a secure United Nations channel. The representatives from China and Russia exchanged skeptical glances. That's the official position, Blake continued, noticing their doubt. But we all know the reality. Whoever deciphers this technology first gains a tremendous advantage. The alien garbage might be more valuable than all the gold on Earth. Later that evening, Alan and Olivia sat in his temporary office at the Nevada facility. Pieces of alien technology were spread across his desk. It's like finding a landfill from 200 years in the future, Alan said, examining what appeared to be a power source. They've moved beyond this technology, but to us it's beyond cutting edge. Olivia picked up what looked like a curved piece of metal. Why would they dump it here? There's plenty of empty space. Alan shrugged. Maybe it was convenient. Maybe they were being kind in their way, or maybe they were testing us, said a new voice. Kevin Reyes, a weapons specialist assigned to the project, walked in carrying coffee for everyone. His muscular frame filled the doorway before he entered and set down the cups. What do you mean? Asked Olivia. Think about it, Kevin said, sitting down. You encounter a new species. You want to know what they're like, how they think. So you give them something valuable, but outdated to you, and see what they do with it. Alan considered this. If that's true, what are they hoping to learn? Whether we're a threat, Kevin replied simply. Whether we turn everything into a weapon. The three sat in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. A week later, research facilities around the world began reporting their first findings. The alien materials had properties unlike anything on Earth, metals that changed density under certain conditions, power sources that utilized unknown principles, and compounds that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Dr. Murphy, look at this, Olivia called excitedly one evening. Alan walked over to her workstation where she had connected an Earth battery to what they believed was an alien cleaning device. When she completed the circuit, the device hummed to life, producing a small field that made dust particles dance in the air before disappearing. It works, Alan whispered in amazement. We made alien technology work. General Blake, who had been observing from the doorway, stepped forward with a rare smile. Excellent work, Dr. Grant, she said. This is just the beginning. Kevin studied the device with intense interest. If this cleaning field can disintegrate dust particles, he said thoughtfully, I wonder what else it might disintegrate if we modified it. Alan caught the look in Kevin's eyes and felt a chill. The race to weaponize the alien junk had begun. 6 months passed since the day the aliens dropped their garbage into Earth's orbit. The world had changed. New words entered everyday language. Phyrexian, alien salvage, space junk gold rush. Countries raced to collect falling debris, and black markets emerged for alien technology. Dr. Alan Murphy's lab in Nevada had expanded. What started as a small research team now occupied an entire underground facility. Scientists from various fields worked around the clock, trying to understand the alien technology. Alan walked through the lab, nodding at colleagues as he passed. He stopped at Olivia Grant's station, where she was examining a strange metal that changed color when heated. Any progress, he asked. Olivia looked up and smiled. Her eyes were tired but excited. This material absorbs energy in ways we've never seen before. It might be the key to solving our energy crisis if we can replicate it. Across the room, Kevin Reyes was working with a team of engineers. His area was separated by a glass wall and required special access. The sign on the door read, Applied Technologies Division. Murphy, called General Blake from the doorway. Join me for a moment. Alan followed her to a conference room where screens showed research facilities from around the world. Moscow, Beijing, London, Tokyo, all working on different aspects of the alien technology. The Russians claim they've reverse-engineered a propulsion system, Blake said, pointing to one screen. The Chinese say they've cracked the alien data storage devices. Are they sharing their findings? Alan asked. knowing the answer. Blake laughed. Of course not. Despite the UN agreements, everyone's keeping their breakthroughs secret, which is why I've called this meeting. The door opened and 5 people entered. Olivia, Kevin, and 3 government officials Alan didn't recognize. Dr. Murphy, said a tall woman in a dark suit. I'm Director Heather Watts from the Pentagon. We need to talk about your progress. For the next hour, Alan and his team presented their findings. They had managed to activate several alien devices by connecting them to Earth power sources. Some worked as expected, cleaning tools, medical scanners, and data processors. Others behaved in unexpected ways when combined with human technology. Show them the disruption field, Blake ordered. Kevin stood and activated a video. It showed a small device, part alien, part human technology, creating a field that caused electronic equipment to shut down. The aliens used this component as part of a recycling system, Kevin explained, but when we connected it to our power grid and modified the output, it created a field that disrupts electrical signals. The officials looked impressed. What's the range? Director Watts asked. Currently 50 meters, Kevin replied. But we believe we can extend it with more power. And the effects on humans? None so far. It only affects electronics. Alan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had objected to this line of research, arguing that they should focus on beneficial applications, but he was overruled. After the meeting, Alan confronted Blake in the hallway. This isn't what we agreed to, he said. We're supposed to be learning from their technology, not turning it into weapons. Blake's face hardened. We're doing both. Doctor, the world isn't as simple as you scientists want it to be. The Russians are developing their own weapons. So are the Chinese. We need to stay ahead. We don't know that for certain, Alan argued. Yes, we do, Blake replied, handing him a tablet with intelligence reports. Our satellites captured these images last week. Alan looked at the screen showing what appeared to be a test of some alien-human hybrid weapon in a remote area of Siberia. Trees were flattened in a perfect circle, but there was no explosion crater. This is exactly why we need to understand the defensive applications, Blake said more softly. I'm not asking you to build bombs, Alan. I'm asking you to help protect our country. Later that evening, Alan found Olivia in the lab still working despite the late hour. You should get some rest, he said. Olivia looked up from her microscope. I'm close to something, Alan. This material, it's like it was designed to be modified, almost as if... As if what? As if the aliens knew we would try to repurpose it, she finished, running a hand through her hair. Have you ever wondered if they left this stuff on purpose, not just as garbage, but as some kind of test? Alan had considered this possibility many times. Kevin suggested something similar on the first day. And what do you think? I think we should be very careful about what we create with their technology, Alan replied. Speaking of which, I'm concerned about Kevin's weapons research. Olivia's expression changed. You saw the reports from Russia, and China has been testing something in the Gobi Desert that melts sand into glass. That doesn't mean we should join the arms race. My brother flies patrol missions along the Russian border, Olivia said. If they develop weapons we can't counter, what happens to him? To all of us? Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm. Not the facility alarm, but Olivia's phone. It's my brother, she said, looking at the screen. He's calling from his base in Germany. Alan nodded and stepped away to give her privacy, but he could see the worry on her face as she answered. The next morning, Alan arrived at the lab to find Olivia already working, her eyes red from crying. What happened? He asked gently. Jack's squadron had an encounter with Russian jets near the border, she said. Nothing serious, but tensions are high. They're patrolling a debris field that both countries claim. Before Alan could respond, Kevin walked into the lab looking excited. We had a breakthrough, he announced. Come see. They followed him to the testing area where a small device sat on a table. It looked like a silver box with alien components attached to human circuit boards. Watch this, Kevin said, placing a piece of metal on a stand 10 feet away. He activated the device, A nearly invisible wave rippled through the air. When it hit the metal, the piece sagged as if turning to liquid, then reformed into a different shape. It reconfigures molecular bonds, Kevin explained proudly. The aliens use this technology to reshape materials for recycling. We've modified it to work at a distance and with more precision. Military applications? Blake asked, entering the room. Countless, Kevin replied. Vehicle disablement without explosives, non-lethal crowd control, precision strikes that leave surrounding areas untouched. Alan looked at Olivia, expecting to see the same concern he felt. Instead, he saw fascination. If we could control the effect, she said, we could use it for construction, medical procedures, manufacturing. Exactly, Kevin nodded. The Pentagon is calling it Project Disruptor. They want a working prototype in 3 months. As they discussed the technical details, Alan stepped back and watched his colleagues. 6 months ago, they were focused on understanding alien technology. Now they were using it to create weapons unlike anything Earth had seen before. The aliens had given humanity their garbage, and humanity was turning it into something deadly. 1 year after the aliens had dumped their garbage in Earth's orbit, the Nevada facility had transformed into a massive research complex. Security checkpoints dotted the perimeter. Military vehicles patrolled the grounds. The scientific mission had evolved into something far more focused on defense and offense. Alan Murphy sat in his office, reviewing the latest test results. The door opened, and Kevin Reyes walked in wearing a new uniform with the rank of major clearly visible. Congratulations on the promotion, Alan said without looking up. Thank you, Kevin replied, sitting down across from him. The brass is pleased with our progress. Alan finally raised his eyes. I'm sure they are. The disruptor prototype exceeded expectations. That's why I'm here, Kevin said, leaning forward. We're ready for the next phase. General Blake wants your team to join us. Alan shook his head. My team is focused on understanding the alien communication systems. We're not weapons developers. Everything here is weapons development now, Alan, Kevin said. Even your communication research has military applications. Their conversation was interrupted when Olivia burst into the office, her face pale. What's wrong? Alan asked, standing up. It's Jack, she said, her voice breaking. His plane was shot down. Alan moved to comfort her while Kevin asked, Where? How? Near the Baltic, Olivia said. They were monitoring a Russian operation to recover a large piece of alien debris. Something hit their electronics. All systems failed simultaneously. Kevin and Alan exchanged glances. They both knew what that meant. Did he eject? Kevin asked. Olivia nodded. He's alive but injured. The Russians say it was an accident, that they were testing equipment and didn't know American planes were in the area. They knew, Kevin said firmly. They've developed their own version of the disruptor. 2 days later, Alan found Olivia in the lab, working harder than ever before. You should take some time off, he suggested. Visit Jack in the hospital. I will, she said, not looking up from her work. After we finish this. She showed him a modified version of the alien recycling device they had been studying. It looked more streamlined, more purposeful. What have you done to it? Alan asked. I've integrated it with our microwave technology, she explained. The aliens use this to break down materials at the molecular level for recycling. We can use it to generate intense heat at a distance. Alan stared at her. You've built a weapon. I've built a prototype that could become a weapon, she corrected. Him. One that could have protected my brother. Alan wanted to argue, to remind her of their original mission to understand the aliens, not to create ways to kill each other, but the determined look in her eyes stopped him. The next week, General Blake organized a demonstration for Pentagon officials. In a remote section of the desert, targets were set up. Old vehicles, dummy equipment, and simulated enemy positions. Alan watched from the observation bunker as Kevin presented the first weapon, the disruptor. With a flick of a switch, a wave of energy swept over an old tank. Its electronic systems sparked and died instantly. As you can see, Kevin explained to the officials, the target is completely disabled without any physical damage. The effect works on any electronic device within the field. Next came Olivia's project, which she had named the phaser, after the fictional weapon from old science fiction shows. The phaser operates on a different principle, she explained. It creates a focused beam of energy that excites molecules to generate extreme heat. She aimed the device at a metal target. Within seconds, the metal glowed red, then white, then melted into a puddle. The officials applauded. Most importantly, General Blake added, neither of these weapons would have been possible with human technology alone. By combining our science with alien components, we've created hybrid weapons that are decades, maybe centuries ahead of conventional arms. After the demonstration, Director Watts approached Alan. Dr. Murphy, you've been quiet. What are your thoughts? Alan chose his words carefully. These are powerful technologies that we don't fully understand. The aliens use these components for construction and recycling. We've turned them into weapons. That's what humans do, Doctor, Watts replied. Throughout history, we've adapted technology for defense. The aliens must have known this when they left their garbage. That evening, alone in his office, Alan copied research files onto a secure drive. If one nation possessed these weapons exclusively, the balance of power would shift dramatically. The world needed to know what was happening. As he finished the download, he heard a noise at the door. He quickly hid the drive in his pocket. Working late? It was General Blake. Just reviewing some data, Alan said casually. Blake walked to the window overlooking the testing grounds. I know you have concerns about the program, Alan. I think we're moving too fast without considering the consequences. The consequences of not developing these weapons could be worse, Blake argued. Intelligence reports confirm that China has created a device that can manipulate gravity using alien technology. Russia has something that affects brain activity at a distance. So we're in a new arms race, Alan said. One with technology we barely understand. Precisely why we need to stay ahead, Blake replied. The president has authorized full production of both the disruptor and the phaser. Your research will be classified at the highest level. After Blake left, Alan took out the drive. Leaking the information could slow the arms race, but it could also spread the technology further. He had no easy answers. The next morning, Alan was surprised to find Kevin and Olivia already in the lab working on a new device. What's this? He asked. The next generation, Kevin said proudly. We're combining the disruptor and phaser technologies. We're calling it the nullifier, Olivia added. It could neutralize any weapon or defense system on Earth. Alan looked at the alien components they were using. What had once been garbage discarded by a passing civilization was now the heart of weapons that could change warfare forever. The aliens gave us junk, he said quietly. And we're turning it into something they never imagined. Kevin finished with a smile. But Alan wasn't smiling. He wondered if the Vrexians had imagined exactly this outcome. And if so, what did that say about how they viewed humanity? 3 years had passed since the aliens dumped their garbage in Earth's orbit. The world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Major cities now had strange, sleek buildings made from alien materials. Cars ran on new energy sources. Hospitals used modified alien technology to treat once incurable diseases. But the greatest changes remained hidden from public view. Alan Murphy walked through a crowded street in Washington, D.C., his collar turned up against the cold. He no longer worked at the Nevada facility. 6 months ago, he had resigned in protest over the growing weapons program. Now he worked as a consultant, speaking at international conferences about the responsible use of alien technology. His phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. Turn on the news. Alan ducked into a cafe and watched the television mounted on the wall. Breaking news showed smoke rising from a border region between India and Pakistan. Reports are still coming in, the newscaster said. But witnesses describe a strange weapon that disabled Indian forces without causing any visible damage. Pakistan denies involvement, but tensions are escalating rapidly. Alan knew immediately what had happened. The disruptor technology had spread. He called Olivia back. "You saw it?" she asked when she answered. "Yes, how did they get the technology?" "We don't know," Olivia replied. Her voice sounded different now, harder, more professional. She had been promoted to lead researcher after Alan left. "But you were right, Alan. The arms race has gone global." "Where's Kevin?" Alan asked. "Colonel Reyes is meeting with NATO officials in Brussels. The situation is getting complicated." Colonel Reyes. Kevin had climbed the ranks quickly, now heading the military division of the Alien Technology Program. Later that day, Alan met Olivia at a secure location, a small apartment owned by the government. She looked tired, but determined. "It's worse than we thought," she said, spreading classified photos across the table. "At least 7 nations now have hybrid weapons based on alien technology. China's gravity manipulator can create localized gravity wells strong enough to crush tanks. Russia's neural disruptor can incapacitate soldiers without killing them." "And our weapons?" Alan asked. "The nullifier works," Olivia said quietly. "Better than we expected. It can shut down any technology within a 1-mile radius, including other hybrid weapons." Alan studied the photos. "These aren't defensive weapons anymore, Olivia. They're designed for offensive operations." "I know, that's why I contacted you." She handed him a datapad. "Look at these energy signatures we detected last week from space." Alan examined the readings. "These look like Phyrexian technology." "They are. Someone is still in orbit watching us. They never left completely." "Or they came back," Alan suggested. "Either way, I think you were right from the beginning. This was a test, and we're failing." Their conversation was interrupted by breaking news on Olivia's phone. The border conflict had escalated. Pakistan had used a new weapon that witnesses described as melting buildings while leaving people unharmed. Clearly a modified version of the phaser. 3 days later, the United Nations called an emergency session. Representatives from all major powers gathered in New York. Alan was invited as an expert consultant along with Olivia and Kevin, who flew in from Brussels. "The situation is critical," the Secretary General began. "For the first time since the development of nuclear weapons, we face a technological revolution that threatens global stability. One by one, nations accused each other of stealing technology, violating international agreements, and threatening peace." The tension in the room was palpable. Then a delegate from a small African nation stood up. "2 days ago, my country was caught in a border dispute with our neighbor. They used a weapon that turned our military vehicles to dust. 30 soldiers died. We had no defense." The room fell silent. "This is what we feared," General Blake said quietly to Alan. She had been promoted to chairwoman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and represented the U.S. military at the meeting. "The technology is spreading faster than we can control it." Alan stood and approached the podium. Although he wasn't scheduled to speak, the Secretary General nodded for him to proceed. 3 years ago, an alien race we call the Phyrexians dropped what appeared to be garbage into our orbit," Alan began. "We've turned their discarded materials into weapons that now threaten global security." He displayed images on the main screen, showing the progression of hybrid weapons development. "But I believe there's something we've all missed," he continued. "The Phyrexian technology was too perfectly suited for adaptation. The components worked too well with our own technology." He showed new data on the screen, complex patterns hidden in the alien materials that only became apparent when specific frequencies were applied. "My analysis suggests the garbage drop wasn't random. It was carefully designed. The Phyrexians embedded patterns in their technology that only emerge when used in certain ways." The delegates murmured among themselves. "I believe the Phyrexians are monitoring our response," Alan concluded. "This may have been a test all along, to see how humanity would use advanced technology. Would we use it for medicine, energy, construction, or would we turn it into weapons?" As Alan finished speaking, every electronic device in the building suddenly activated. Phones, computers, even the microphone system, all displayed the same symbol. the angular Vrexian mark they had seen on the containers. Then a message appeared. Phase 1 assessment complete. Proceeding to Phase 2. The room erupted in chaos as security teams rushed in, fearing an attack. But nothing happened except the message, which disappeared after 30 seconds. Later that evening, Alan, Olivia, and Kevin gathered in a secure room at the UN building with General Blake and representatives from other major powers. "What does it mean?" asked the Russian representative. "Phase 2? They're coming back," Kevin said, looking uncharacteristically worried. "The question is whether they're coming back as friends or enemies." "That might depend on what they think of how we use their technology," Alan said. The Chinese representative leaned forward. "We did what any species would do. We protected ourselves." "By creating weapons of mass destruction," Alan countered. Olivia, who had been analyzing the message, looked up from her computer. "There's more data embedded in the transmission. Coordinates in our solar system and a time frame, 3 months from now." General Blake took charge. "We need to prepare for all possibilities. If the Vrexians return with hostile intent, we need to be ready." "And if they come in peace?" Alan asked. "Then we'll have some explaining to do about what we did with their garbage," Kevin replied grimly. As the meeting continued into the night, Alan stepped outside for a moment of quiet, looking up at the stars. He wondered what the aliens had learned about humanity from their test. Had they expected us to weaponize their technology so quickly? Or had they hoped for something better? The message was clear. The Vrexians were coming back, and humanity's response to their garbage would determine Earth's future. The morning sky turned bright as massive ships appeared above major cities around the world. 5 years after their first visit, the Vrexians had returned. Their vessels were larger and more impressive than before, hanging silently above Earth, like metallic clouds. Unlike their first arrival, this time they made no attempt to hide. Their ships positioned themselves over New York, Beijing, Moscow, London, and other capitals. Yet they made no hostile moves. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, world leaders gathered hastily. Alan Murphy, now the head of Earth's Alien Technology Commission, stood at the window watching the enormous ship above the city. "They could have attacked without warning," Kevin said, now General Reyes after his rapid rise through military ranks. He stood in full uniform, tense and ready. "The fact that they haven't is a good sign." Olivia joined them, carrying the latest sensor readings. "Their technology signatures match what we've seen before, but much more advanced. They're scanning us extensively." A sudden hush fell over the room as all screens activated simultaneously. The angular Vrexian symbol appeared, followed by a message in perfect English. "We request dialogue. Send representatives." Within hours, a delegation was assembled. Alan, Kevin, and Olivia joined General Blake and 12 world leaders on the roof of the UN building. A beam of light extended from the ship above, and a platform descended. 3 Vrexians stood on the platform. They were tall, with silvery skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were large and entirely black. They wore no weapons or protective gear. "We welcome you," said the center Vrexian in perfect English. "Please join us." The human delegation stepped onto the platform, which ascended smoothly into the ship. Inside, they were led to a large chamber that seemed designed specifically for this meeting. The walls displayed images of Earth, cities, oceans, and most notably the hybrid weapons humans had created. "I am Nexor," said the lead Vrexian. "We have been observing your response to our gift." "Gift?" General Blake questioned. "You dumped garbage in our orbit." "Not garbage," Nexor corrected. "Tools. Basic tools that we no longer needed, but which contained the fundamental principles of our technology. We have done this with many emerging species throughout our history." "It was a test," Alan said, the confirmation of his theory bringing him no satisfaction. "Yes," Nexor agreed. "We discover new civilizations regularly. Some are peaceful, others violent. We developed this method to evaluate potential allies and threats." The walls now showed images of hybrid weapons being used in conflicts around Earth. "You turned recycling tools into weapons of destruction," Nexor continued. "Construction devices into means of warfare, medical scanners into targeting systems. Kevin stepped forward. We did what was necessary to protect ourselves. For all we knew, you were hostile. Yet your first instinct was not defense, but domination, Nexor observed. You created weapons to use against each other. Alan couldn't argue with this truth. Humanity had taken alien junk and turned it deadly, against other humans. What happens now? Olivia asked. Is this the judgment phase? Nexor tilted his head in what might have been amusement. In a way, but you misunderstand our purpose. The weapons you created are crude versions of tools we use daily for construction and healing. What is interesting is not that you weaponized our technology, but how brilliantly you adapted it. The other Vrexians nodded in agreement. Many species fail our test by destroying themselves with our tools, Nexor explained. Others cannot understand the technology at all. Humans are rare. You grasped the principles quickly and applied them with remarkable creativity. The tension in the room eased slightly. We offer you a choice, Nexor concluded. Join the galactic community under our guidance, with strict ethical oversight of advanced technology, or remain isolated but monitored, developing at your own pace, with the understanding that certain boundaries cannot be crossed. As the delegation discussed this momentous decision, Alan gazed out a viewport at Earth below. One civilization's trash had become another's treasure and weapon, and now might become their key to the stars. Whatever we decide, he said quietly, to Olivia and Kevin, we've proven something important. What's that? Olivia asked. That humans can take even alien junk and make something powerful from it. That adaptability is our greatest strength, and perhaps our greatest danger. As the discussions continued, the Vrexians watched with their large black eyes, still evaluating the species that had turned their discarded tools into weapons of war, and yet might now be ready to join a larger universe.